One of my favorite archetypes in all of Commander is Blink. Recurring powerful enters the battlefield effects is one of the most satisfying things in all of Magic the Gathering, and it's no wonder as to why. So many creatures in Magic's history have been played simply for these effects, and doing them once or twice or 40 times can totally warp the game around it. The problem I've run into, however, is that these decks can be a little samey. You start your Blink deck out and you're like, alright, we got Ephemerate and Restoration Angel, and oh, we'll play blue for Ghostly Flicker and Muldrifter and Soul Herder, and ooh, we can play green and have Eternal Witness and Avengers Zendikar, and you see what I mean? The commander may change as time goes on, but at the core of every Blink deck is the same 40-ish cards that are automatically included. Well, how do we solve this? My solution isn't that these cards are bad, but that we need to stretch outside of our comfort zone in terms of the main problem: color. If we allow ourselves to play white, blue, green, or any of these typical Blink colors, we'll fall into the same pitfall as before and just succumb to the sameness. That's why I've built today's deck, RAKDOS Blink, a Chainer deck. So why Chainer? The second line of text on Chainer Nightmare Adept is invaluable to me in this style of deck because it allows us to go to combat with our recently blinked creatures, while also serving as a constant source of value as the game progresses. Being able to pitch dead land draws to rebuy powerful enters the battlefield effects will help keep the deck ahead while also serving as a tool to close out the games with huge finishers. But what exactly can we blink with? Well, a lot of the traditional flicker lies in blue and white, with cards that exile creatures and immediately return them to the battlefield. Sure, we have Voyager's Staff and Conjurer's Closet, but the cards I want to run in this deck will have to act as simulacra for these effects, as red and black have unfortunately not had any cards printed that say exile this creature, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. With this deck, I'm hoping to use cards like Supernatural Stamina, Undying Evil, and Feign Death to act as our stand-in for cards like Ephemerate. With onboard sacrifice outlets, these cards turn into ways to instantly rebuy the effect of any creature that we want. It's also incredibly easy to actually go infinite with one of these things. The newly reprinted Phyrexian Altar, Feign Death, and Ardent Elementalist is a loop that, while not netting us any mana or resources, lets us get infinite death triggers and infinite enters the battlefield triggers. Burnt Offering is another cute include because using Chainer's ability, we can just recast the creature we sacrificed. We cast our Meteor Golem, blow something up, discard a card to Chainer, Burnt Offering our Meteor Golem, and then use the 7 mana floating to cast it from our graveyard. It's like Black Cloud Shift with a few more steps. What exactly are we blinking in this strategy? Well, for starters, I wanted to include a bunch of classics that I never get a chance to play in these traditionally Bant-based strategies. Removing creatures can be pretty easy with stuff like Shriekmaw, Ravenous Chupacabra, and Plaguecrafter, especially if we buy back the ability more than once. Shriekmaw is especially potent with cards like Supernatural Stamina, letting us evoke for the 1 and a black cost and keep the creature once it dies to the sacrifice. Getting ahead in the mid-game can also be a breeze with stuff like Solemn Simulacrum, Disciple of Bolas, and Garna the Bloodflame. These all obviously play well with one of our blink spells, but Garna can help us rebuild after a board wipe on someone else's turn, or even just let us put our entire board back in our hand with a sacrifice outlet. They're all a little on the expensive side, but with enough mana lying around, we're bound to always have something to do. Grey Merchant of Asphodel recurred more than 3 or 4 times can wrap up a game pretty quickly, as does a card like Massacre Worm or Grave Titan. These cards are on the meteor side, but recurring their ability is going to put us pretty ahead once we're in that late stage of the game. For continuous resource generation, I'd like to include Squee, Goblin Nabob, Revolutionist, and Ardent Elementalist. Squee helps us always have something to discard to our Chainer's ability, while Revolutionist and Elementalist help us rebuy the blink spells to keep using our creature's wild abilities. Doubling up on enters the battlefield effects is also easily achievable with cards like Panharmonicon and Flame Shadow Conjuring, letting us get even more value from our creatures that were either recurring or blinking. Even though Flame Shadows involves a mana investment, most of the creatures we're putting into play have an effect that will be worth much more than 1 mana. So what cards are enabling us to win? In Blink decks, I often find that getting aggressive can be increasingly difficult, as a lot of the creatures we're choosing to include don't have high stat values, but instead a powerful effect attached to a mediocre body. Although this predicament is unfortunate, there are ways to use these creatures to a winning advantage. Purphoros, God of the Forge, Impact Tremors, and Terror of the Peaks are all great ways of turning creatures into repetitive damage that can simultaneously take all of our opponents out of the game. Even though 1 and 2 damage doesn't seem like a lot when everyone starts at 40, it definitely adds up. In terms of mana, I think this depends entirely on budget. For me personally, I like to run as many dual lands as possible, with a few minor utility lands if given the opportunity. Cabal Coffers and Urborg could probably shine in this deck, as our strategy is pretty mana intensive. Artifact Ramp is also crucial, which is why I'd recommend running as many 2-mana signets as possible, letting us cast our commander on turn 3 a higher percentage of games. Plus, they're almost never dead draws with our commander's ability, as they can be pitched to let us cast a higher value card in our graveyard. When it comes to building decks, it's very easy to get hyper-focused on the best cards for each strategy, and maybe overlooking a playstyle that could be fun in a different color combination. This deck was heavily inspired by the modern Undying Evil Evoke deck, and I think using outside examples as ways of recontextualizing how you build decks can not only open up the possibilities for exciting combinations, but also let you branch out to play types of Magic you normally wouldn't have. If you have any ideas for a strange archetype break like this one, let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to see what other people are brewing. If you want to see this list or other lists I've made, I'll have a MoxFeed link in my bio. If you enjoyed this video, it really helps if you hit the like button, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel. I'm also on Twitter, so feel free to ask me any questions you have about the video on there or in the comments below. Thanks for watching.